So when we left off, we're on chapter 18. Mason, we're on chapter 18. And at the end of chapter 17, it's kind of a bum chapter. Like, Jeffrey's really fit in pretty well in an area where white kids wouldn't normally fit in. And it just so happens that everybody's really nice to him. Almost everybody. Who are the people that have been really nice and welcoming to Jeffrey? Okay. Amanda. Her family.
Hands down.
Hands down has been his hype man, which is kind of cool. I know Hester and Lester, that's Amanda's siblings. They really enjoy him being around. Anybody else you can think of?
And they barely even get bats, and now they get bats with him.
Who has not been kind to him? There's really only a couple of people. Mason? Wyatt, if you have something to say, just raise your hand, please. Mason, who has not been nice to him?
The candy bar guy.
The candy bar, Mars bar, right? Bunch of trash talking, and it's kind of gotten in his face quite a couple times. Who else, Mason? The strikeout guy, yeah. So he's the one that had like 26 strikeouts, and then Jeffrey knocked a home run, one after another, and hit the ball anyway. Didn't strike him out. Messed up his thing, his streak. But that was also on West End, I do believe. But the story has been told all over. And then there was an older gentleman while the kids were out playing in the water on a hot day. And an older gentleman came out and was telling him, like, go on now, boy, get out of here, boy. Like, what are you doing here? You don't belong here. Go back with your own kind of mentality, which everybody was kind of surprised by. Some lady, like, brought the older man back inside. And at the end of that chapter, somebody had written some graffiti on his house. Not his house, on Amanda's house. It said fish belly, which was like a derogatory way of saying that he's white. And I would imagine him being the only white person in that house probably knows that it was directed towards him. Chapter 18 is where we left off. If you could shut the door for me, Mason, I would really appreciate it. Thank you, sir. All right, so chapter 18, Amanda tried to reason with him. You can't listen to that old coot. He's goofy. He's always saying stuff like that. You can't go because of something one nutty old coot said. Maniac pointed out that it wasn't the nutty old coot who chalked up the front of that house. Amanda laughed. That's no big deal. It wasn't even paint. If they really meant it, they would have done it in paint. And anyway, don't you know they did my mother a favor? It gave her a chance to get out the old bucket and do some serious scrubbing. Ever since the kids stopped cranning the house, she hasn't known what to do with herself. Now she's happy again. Boy, I love the optimism that Amanda has. Maniac didn't answer. Amanda didn't answer that most of the hurt he felt was not for himself, but for her and for the rest of the family. She stomped her foot. You gotta stay. I don't gotta do anything. You go, you'll starve. Was I starving before I came here? Well, you'll freeze to death in the winter. Your fingers will get so stiff they'll break off like icicles. I'll go somewhere. Somewhere like the deer pen? I'll be okay. Or maybe Prairie Dog Town, huh? How about that? She jabbed him. You could live in a gopher hole. You'd be starving, so that would be perfect, because then you'd be so skinny you could fit right down there all snugly in those little tunnels. He shrugged. Sounds cozy. This was driving Amanda bonkers. He was acting so different, all glum and wiseacre answers, as if he didn't care. Not about anything. Yeah, she sniffed. Well, what are you going to do for a pillow, huh? I know you put my pillow on the floor. I'll use hibernating gopher. Funny. And bathroom, huh? Where are you going to go to the bathroom? The bushes? McDonald's? Lots of places. She hated it. An answer for everything. And the scariest part was, he was probably right. If anybody could survive on the loose, it would be this kid who showed up from Hollidaysburg, who slept on floors, who outran dogs. He was making her so mad. She pointed at him. She sneered, well, I'll tell you one thing, buddy boy. You better shut the door on your way out and lock it, because if I get my room back, I'm not giving it up again. So don't ever come crawling back around here. She kicked him in the sneaker. You hear? Don't worry, he said flatly. And don't think you're taking any of my books with you this time either. You can forget about ever getting a chance to open my Encyclopedia A, which I was almost ready to let you do before you went and started acting all poopy. He said, I'll join the library. She jumped up. Ha! You can't! No, you need a library card. Well, I'll get one. Ha ha! You can't get a library card without an address. She regretted it as soon as she said it. His head swung, his eyes met hers. His eyes said, why'd you say that? Her eyes couldn't answer. He got up and went out and trotted up the street. Amanda cried. She tore a magazine in half. She punched the sofa. She kicked the easy chair. She kicked Bow Wow. Bow Wow went yelping into the kitchen. See, she yelled at the front door. You see what you made me do, Jeffrey Magee? Jeffrey Maniac, crazy man, Bozo Magee. He wasn't back by lunch. He wasn't back by dinner. Why is Amanda so angry that he's leaving? Caitlin.
Because they won't get used to him and stuff, and he's like family to him.
I like that. He's like family to them. I like that.
And there's nothing she can do to make him come back.
Yeah, there's nothing she can do to stop what other people have said to make him want to stay or want to come back. In the book, it says that he's got an answer for everything, and he really does. The interesting part about the story, too, if you remember back to the beginning, Jeffrey, how long was he on his own for?
A year.
Yeah, a full year to travel 200 miles on his own, and he survived, which is pretty remarkable for a kid Jeffrey's age. So she's really upset. I think Caitlin hit the nail on the head here when she said he's like family to them. I'm going looking, Amanda told her worried parents. No one tried to stop her. She rode her bike all over. East End, West End, please stop. She even went over to Bridgeport, practically got herself killed on that bridge. She never pedaled so much in her life. She didn't come home till after dark. When her parents headed upstairs to bed, she asked if she could stay up to watch TV. They looked at each other and said, okay. She was nodding off in the middle of some late movie when the door opened and he walked in. What are you doing up so late? He said. I'm incubating an egg, she snarled. He shrugged and went upstairs. She closed her eyes and smiled. We're on page 67. Next morning, a little kid from 3 blocks away came knocking at the front door. His yo-yo string had a knot as fat as a mushroom. Man, you ever tried to get a knot out of a yo-yo string?
No.
Darn near impossible, because the string is so small and the knots get so tight, it's really hard to like pick those apart. As Amanda watched Maniac tackle the knot, an idea slithered into her brain. When the little kid left with his string good as new, she said, Jeffrey, if I knew some way that would make it okay for you to stay, would you? What do you mean, okay, he said. I mean that even if there's 1 or 2 people who aren't too wild about you now, and that's all there really are, that even they would like you, and everybody else who already likes you, they'll like you even more. Purely out of curiosity, Maniac replied, how's all that supposed to happen? Amanda told him about Cobble's knot. Or about the Cobble's knot. What do you think the Cobble's knot is?
A racing show.
A what?
Racing show?
Cobble's knot is a racing show.
No, it's a type of knot, I think.
It's a type of knot. Well, based on the story, they haven't talked too much about racing other than he's really fast, but knot-wise, if it's a type of knot, it might be. Yeah.
I think it's the biggest knot that nobody's been able to untie.
I think you might be right. It's the biggest knot that nobody's ever been able to untie. So if he could do it, maybe that might make everybody like him.
I think it might be where if they untie, they go on to the next round. If they don't get so hot in a matter of time, they get,
So maybe there's like some kind of competition to untie the knot. Like, and if you do it, then you go on to the next round or something like that. A knot tying or not untying competition. Chapter 19. If the wonders of the world hadn't stopped at 7, Cobble's knot would have been number 8. Nobody knew how it got there. As the story goes, the original Mr. Cobble wasn't doing too well with the original Cobble's Corner grocery at the corner of Hector and Birch. In his first 2 weeks, all he sold was some Quaker Oats and penny candy. Then one morning, as he unlocked the front door for business, he saw the knot. It was dangling from a flagpole that hung over the big picture window, the one that said Frosted Foods in icy blue and white letters. He got out a pair of scissors and was about to snip it off when he noticed what an unusual and incredible knot it was. And then he got an idea. He could offer a prize to anybody who untangled the knot. Publicize it. Call the newspaper. Winner's picture on the front page. Cobble's Corner in the background. Business would move. Business would boom. As we read that, if you're following along, did you notice the word not is in capital, like has a capital K?
Yes.
But is that a proper noun? No. Like the word not isn't unless you're talking about the knot. Like we're identifying that as a very specific knot. It's like the knot. Like it's a really big deal. It's so big it's got a name. So that's why you have a capital K on there. Because they're treating it like a proper noun. A really important thing that's there in that town. Go ahead.
But it's just like I'm not going.
I am not going would be a different spelling. N-O-T. K-N-O-T would be like the thing you have to untie. But this is more than just any old regular knot. This is like the knot. Like this is the one. The eighth wonder of the world, so to speak. So, Mason, you're right. There's a competition to untie this knot. Publicize it. Call the newspaper. Winner's picture on the front page. Cobble's Corner in the background. Business would boom. Well, he went ahead and did it. And if business didn't exactly boom, it must have at least peaked a little because eons later when Maniac Magee came to town, Cobble's Corner was still there. Only now it sold pizza instead of groceries. And the prize was different. It started out being 60 seconds alone with the candy counter. Now it was one large pizza per week for a whole year. What's that tell you about the knot? If the prize is that you get 10 minutes alone with the candy counter, or you get one pizza a week for a whole year, what's that tell you about the kind of knot that it must be?
It's like the tightest, the biggest knot ever.
The tightest, the biggest knot ever. I really like your inferencing. You're good at that. It must be a pretty significant knot. It tells me that nobody's been able to untie it because they keep making the prize bigger, and it must be a pretty hard knot to untie if nobody's been able to do it. Which in time made the knot practically priceless, which is why after leaving it outside for a year, Mr. Cobble took it down and kept it in a secret place inside the store, and he brought it out only to meet a challenger. If you look at old pictures in the 2 Mills times, you see that the knot was about the size and shape of a lopsided volleyball. How big is a volleyball?
Big.
Show me with your hands. How big?
But it's not big, but it's
The
like
volleyball is not that big.
Yeah, so it's bigger than a baseball or a softball, but a little smaller than a basketball,
it's
right?
like that long, but
Yeah.
like that.
So imagine a knot being that big. That would not be fun to undo. Ooh, thanks. Free extra credit for laughing, Mason. All right. It was made of string, but had more contortions, ins and outs, twists and turns, and dips and doodles than the brain of Albert Einstein himself. It had defeated all comers for years, including J.J. Thorndike, who grew up to be a magician, and Fingers Holloway, who became a pickpocket. Hardly a week went by without somebody taking a shot at the knot and losing, and each loser added to the glory that awaited someone who could untie it. So, you see, said Amanda, if you go up there and untie Cobble's knot, which I know you can, you'll get your picture in the paper and you'll be the biggest hero ever around here, and nobody will mess with you then. Maniac listened and thought about it and finally gave a little grin. Maybe you're just after the pizza, since you know I can't eat it. Amanda screeched, Jeffrey, the pizza's not the point. She started to hit him. He laughed and grabbed her wrist. And he said, okay, I'll give it a try. Chapter 20. They brought out the knot and they hung it from the flagpole. They brought out the official square wooden table for the challenger to stand on, and from the moment Maniac climbed up, you could tell the knot was in big trouble. To the ordinary person, Cobble's knot was about as friendly as a nest of yellow jackets. Besides the tangle itself, there was the weathering of that first year when the knot hung outside and became as hard as a rock. You could barely make out the individual strands. It was grimy, moldy, crusted over. Here and there a loop stuck out, maybe big enough to stick your pinky finger through. Pitiful testimony to the challengers who tried and failed. And there stood Maniac, turning the knot, checking it out. Some say there was a faint grin on his face, kind of playful, as though the knot wasn't his enemy at all, but just an old pal playing a little trick on him. Others say his mouth was more grim than grin, that his eyes lit up like flashbulbs because he knew he was finally facing a knot that would stand up and fight, a worthy opponent. He lifted it in his hands to feel the weight of it. He touched it here and touched it there, gently, daintily. He scraped a patch of crust off with his fingernail. He laid his fingertips on it as though feeling for a pulse. Only a few people were watching at first, and half of them were Hex Angels, a roving tricycle gang of 4- and 5-year-olds. Most of them had lace or sneaker lace or yo-yo knots untied by Maniac, and they expected this would only take a couple of seconds longer. When the seconds became minutes, they started to get antsy, and before 10 minutes had passed, they were zooming off in search of somebody to terrorize. The rest of the spectators watched Maniac poke and tug and pick at the knot. Never a big pull or yank, just his fingertips touching and grazing and pecking away like some little bird. "What's he doing?" somebody said. "What's taking so long? Hey, is he gonna do it or not?" After an hour, except for a few more finger-sized loops, all Maniac had to show for his trouble were the flakes of knot crust that covered the table. "He ain't even found the end of the string yet," somebody grumbled, and then almost everybody but Amanda took off. Maniac never noticed. He just went on working. How long could you work on a knot like that?
Second probably.
You could work on it for about a second and then you'd give up?
No.
How long would you work on it before you give up?
2 hours.
You go 2 hours on that knot? Dang, girl.
If I could get one
I'll
strand,
go
I'd
2
like about
hours.
10 minutes.
5-10 minutes?
About 20 minutes.
You could do 20?
45
Yeah.
minutes.
Maybe 3? I personally would get really frustrated. I do get frustrated with knots. I give up pretty easily. It's either I can get it or I can't. And then I either search out scissors or something pointy to try to pick it apart. And if I still can't get it, then I'm like, looks like we're gonna have to cut it off and buy some new string. I don't have very much patience for knots. Who fishes? You ever had a 10-minute tangle while you're fishing?
Yes, I have.
Oh man, there's nothing more frustrating than fishing and all of a sudden like your line comes unspooled and it gets a big knot. You have a spinning rod and it makes that little loop and there's a knot in there. When you cast it, the knot catches and you're like, ah! I hate those kind of knots, man.
My line got twisted up at the top of my pole.
Yeah.
And it was 2-pound test. And because I just bought it, I was trying to get it off. So I pulled one way and the other way, and then my line just snaps.
Yep. Especially if you have lighter light. But if you have really hard line, like that could be hard too, because then you can't pull it and break it off very easily. Man, I hate those tangles. I have very little patience for knots. Let's keep going. How long has Jeffrey been working on it?
An hour.
It's been about an hour. Most people had taken off. Maniac never noticed. He just went on working. By lunchtime, they were all back. And more kept coming, not only kids, but grown-ups too. Black and white, because Cobble's Corner was on Hector, and the world was racing through the neighborhoods on both an east and west sides of the street. If you remember and you go back to the story, Hector kind of divides the east and west side, so it's in the middle. So you have people from both sides of the town coming to watch Jeffrey Magee. What people saw, they didn't believe. The knot had grown. It had swelled, exploded. It was a frizzy globe. The newspaper the next day described it as a gigantic hairball. Now, except for a packed-in clump at the center, it was practically all loops. You could look through it and see Maniac calmly working on the other side. "He found the end!" someone gasped, and the corner burst out into applause. Meanwhile, inside Cobble's was selling pizza left and right, not to mention Zepp's, a 2 Mills type of hoagie. steak sandwiches, strombolis, and gallons of soda. Mr. Cobble himself came out to offer Maniac some pizza, which Maniac, of course, politely turned down. He did accept an orange soda, though, and then a little kid whose sneaker laces Maniac had untied many a time handed up to him a 3-pack of Tasty Cake Butterscotch Crimpets. Everybody hold their belly and go, Crimpets. You ever had one?
No.
Do you even know what it is?
No.
Oh, you don't know what a Tasty Cake Butterscotch Crimpet is?
No.
All right, so the next time I'm at the store, I'm going to search out this week some butterscotch crimpets. I don't know if I'll find the butterscotch ones, but the Tasty Cakes are delicious. You will like them.
Can you bring us all one?
Absolutely.
Yay!
Yay! After polishing off the crimpets, Maniac did the last thing anyone expected. He laid down and he took a nap right there on the table. Crimpets will do that to you. Tasty Cakes. Maniac knew what the rest of them didn't. The hardest part was yet to come. He had to find the right routes to untangle the mess, or it would just close up again like a rock and probably stay that way forever. He needed the touch of a surgeon, the alertness of an owl, the cunning of 3 foxes, and the foresight of a grandmaster in chess. To accomplish that, he needed to clear his head, to flush away all distractions, especially the memory of butterscotch crimpets, which had him already hooked. In exactly 15 minutes, he woke up and started back in. Like some fairy tale tailor, he threaded the end through the maze, dipping and doodling through the openings, the way he squiggled the football through the defense. As long as August afternoon boiled along, the exploded knot hairball would cave in here, cave in there. It got lumpy, out of shape, saggy. The Times photographer made starbursts with his camera. The people munched on Cobble's pizza and spilled across Hector from sidewalk to sidewalk and said, help me with this, go, ooh, ooh. Now say, ah. And then around dinner time, a huge roar went up, a volcano of cheers. Cobble's knot was dead, undone, gone. It was nothing but string. All right, we're gonna stop there for today. I want to point something out real quick. If you go back and look at, especially chapter 19 and chapter 20, I love the words Jerry Spinelli uses in this book. Like, the show not tell details are fantastic. A couple examples of that, where he says, like a fairy tale tailor, he threaded the end through the maze, dipping and doodling through the openings, the way he squiggled the football through the defense. That's pretty good writing. It's one of the things I love about Jerry Spinelli. It's almost poetic, like as you listen to him describe what's happening. So I absolutely love that style in his writing. Chapter 21 we'll have to read mañana.